Welcome to One Shot on Frame. I'm Jason Davis. This episode is Herculez Gomez, former U.S. international, a guy who went to a World Cup, played in Major League Soccer and Liga MX. This is an incredible conversation with Herc. We get into his origin story, going back to Las Vegas, playing as a ringer in adult leagues, backed by restaurateurs, businessmen in the community. Talk about his time in San Diego, how that led to his time with the LA Galaxy, the frustration of Major League Soccer and how much they paid back in the day. Talk about Herc's new gig, currently as part of ESPN's team, and one of the guys you see on Football America is with Sebastian Salazar talking about the sport in North America every week. Great conversation with Herculez Gomez. If you like what you hear here, then make sure you go over, subscribe, do all the things necessary to support the show. Appreciate it very much. Thank you for watching. All right, Herc. This is the photo. I'm going to tell you what I see, and then you tell me what this is. I mean, I see you. I see you there. Looks like you got a camcorder in your hand. I might have to ask about that a little bit later. Where is this? Where's this happening?
So this is Estadio Azteca, and those are my two of my best friends growing up. The one to my immediate right in the middle is Jimmy Vargas. Jimmy Vargas, and the one next to him is Jimmy Dominguez. So I grew up with both these. So Jimmy Vargas and I actually played soccer together from when I was like 9 years old till I want to say 18, around there.
Wow.
Yeah, same club team together. We were one of three Latino kids on this club team in Vegas called New Sport. And the one to the right, he and I went to high school together. His name is Jimmy Dominguez. He's a goalkeeper. Now, what's interesting, these are both El Salvadorian, American kids. But here we are in El Estadio Azteca, and this is a USA versus Mexico, U.S. men's national team versus Mexico game, World Cup qualifier, 2001. And if
Wow.
you could see, I'm actually holding that sweatshirt or sweatshirt, I guess, top. You don't see the crest, but that's a U.S. crest
Oh,
right there.
I recognized the crest. As soon as I saw this picture, I was like, oh, yeah, Herc's wearing a U.S. soccer top there. And
Yeah.
it looks like your boy Jimmy Dominguez is wearing a USA hat. So it's not like you guys were hiding who you were at Estadio Azteca, right?
No, not at all. I want to say there was easily over 100,000 fans there. It was insane. I've never witnessed anything like it. People don't know, but like nowadays, you look at Estadio Azteca, and it feels much more corporate. It feels
Yeah.
less intimate in the sense that they're not on top of you. Um, the NFL came into Estadio Azteca, came into Mexico, and they had certain requisites to be in the stadium. Like, yeah, we'll take the NFL, we'll take our games to Mexico, but the stadium, you've got to fix it. It's got to have premium seating, it's got to have box seats, it's got to have suites.
Right.
So they reduced capacity about 30,000 or so. So it feels less intimidating than it once did. But being there, I could tell you I mean, this is nosebleed seats, and it just felt insane to be part of it. It was the first time I got to see the U.S. men's national team up close. First time I got to see the Mexican national team up close like that. First time I'd ever been in Estadio Azteca.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Anybody who's been to Estadio Azteca will tell you it doesn't matter if it's Pumas, America, or the Mexican national team. There's a sector where the fan bases used to sit, and they jump and they sing and whatnot, and you almost felt like that was vibrating. You almost
Yeah.
felt like it was about to collapse. That's how impressive just the surroundings were back in the day. So this was me at 19 years of age, I think I was, with my two boys in Mexico City. We were all trying out in Mexico, trying to make
Okay.
soccer our dream.
So that was going to be the question is did you go down to Mexico City for the game? What was why are you and your boys in Mexico?
Well, we're trying out. I'm trying to make this a business. I'm trying to make this my dream. I'm trying to make this something I could live off of. And it was becoming increasingly more and more difficult at that time. I at this moment was playing in Águilas Blancas, the Puebla second division team in Puebla. Nothing to do with the first division team in Puebla that we see nowadays. Terrible setup and whatnot. These two guys are like bouncing around training, doing stints here for trials, stints there for trials, find it increasingly difficult because they don't have a Mexican passport and whatnot, just trying to make their dream come true. But we all knew each other, and we got together in Mexico City for this game.
Okay, so you all came from different places because you were all in Mexico trying to get your careers off the ground. I guess let's go back, right? Let's go back to Vegas. Let's go back to when is Hercules Gomez thinking, okay, I'm going to go to Mexico. I'm going to try to make soccer my career. I'm going to go look for an opportunity there. When's that happening?
So when I knew I wanted to go play in Mexico or go try to make this an opportunity, was it was kind of made for me. And I
Okay.
remember looking around the setup. I mean, the first time I knew I wanted to play professional soccer was when I started getting paid for it. I remember playing club soccer, and you play on a Saturday, and I was like 15, about to turn 16, and my dad used to coach this men's league team in Vegas. And the way that men's soccer works, especially in a lot of these circles, is they're owned by restaurants, they're owned by like rich businessmen or whatever, and they compete. They don't want to lose. They want to win, and they invest. So some of these teams would invest in, like, I guess, these ringers, if you will. And I remember I was like 15, 16 years old, and I'm getting paid $100 a game to go play for these teams. And they would buy me cleats, they would buy me gear, they free food after. You'd have a good time. And I enjoyed it. So I started getting paid for it, and I started thinking to myself, like, this isn't so bad. That I could, I want to do this. And it really became one of these things where, as I started getting later in my teenage years, junior, senior year, I started looking at the opportunities around me. I wasn't being scouted by any college team, any university. I wasn't playing ODP. I tried once. It was like $100 a day mini camp fee, and I remember thinking to myself, I can't do this. It's what am I doing here? And started looking at players who were being recruited. Started looking at some of the avenues my club players, my club teammates were getting, and what they would do after: go to college here, go to college there. And
Yeah.
I started asking myself what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to play pro. And the only avenue at that moment, it was 1999 going to 2000, that I had, was making the move to Mexico and trying to play in a lower division. And I actually got to Pachuca, and it's not the Pachuca setup you see now. If you go to the Pachuca setup now, it's unbelievable. One of the best in the world. They got a full blown academy, a university. They combined it. The facilities are world class. They rival anybody in the world. I'm not kidding. But back then, it was a hangar, if you could say that.
Yeah.
And on each side of the hangar, there was bunk beds. So 12 on one side, 12 on the other, with like some showers and like a little like common area that you would eat, and then the soccer fields. And for 2 weeks, when I went on this tryout, that was my life. I ate, I slept, it was part of my air, my oxygen every single day. And it didn't work out because I didn't have a Mexican passport. But there was a scout from Cruz Azul, and they invited me to come out to Cruz Azul, and they put me up food, housing. I was training for a good 3, 4 months, and that really became my life. I didn't sign there; it was just training. I didn't have a Mexican passport at the time,
Hmm.
but that gave me a taste for what Mexican football could be. But that's literally how I started playing in Mexico and kind of seeing, like, this is something feasible. This is 1999, 2000. I mean, MLS was 3 years old. Um, wasn't in my market. I was in Las Vegas. Back then, you had to go to college, enter the draft,
Yeah.
come out of the draft and be 22, 23 years old and get your first taste of professional soccer. I wanted it then. So it was the closest thing I could do.
So I mean, this sounds like the way describe the way that it worked. I mean, you just go to Mexico, show up at a club, and say, "I want to try out." I mean, what was the process for even getting to that point? I'm also curious to know how Hercules Gomez gets a rep in town in Vegas that he can play. Let's pay him $100 to come play in our club team.
That was, well, first, the rep in Vegas was just, you know, um, you wouldn't get a lot of crossover between club and amateur, men's amateur at that
Sorry,
time.
yeah.
And my dad thought I'd be good for the team, and I didn't want to play. I was 15, 16. I didn't want to play with these guys. I thought it was a waste of my time. And until it wasn't, until they started offering some money. And I was like, all right, I'll do this. So I started playing, and I think the first game I played, I scored a hat trick. Just started going to these games and scoring crazy goals. I mean, listen, Jason, you're playing with grown men, and a
Oh,
lot.
sure.
These guys don't have the schedule I have. I was training every single day. I was a fit kid. I was running circles by them. I was scoring goals. But these people who would fund this team, they're like, yeah, I'll give this kid $100 to help me, win a game and whatnot. So it became fun. So a few of those players. By the way, back then in Vegas, and then probably to some extent still now, you would see these businessmen bring like second division Mexican players, first division Mexican players, like on their vacation to play.
That's
Like,
amazing.
yeah, Bud's Cup, like these men's tournaments get crazy and all these ringers and whatnot. So it's a whole like business on its own. And I'm sure those who've experienced it could tell you better than I could. I just, saw it as a way of making some extra
Well,
cash.
I,
So
I, I I know that, my limited experience with that, never having actually interacted with that world, but having, maybe seen something like it, not on that level, I don't think. It's a cultural event. It's not just there's guys playing soccer. There's a whole party happening around all of that that
absolutely.
I think gets missed too. It's not just,
It,
restaurant owner wants to win some games. People are coming out, families are camping, they're cooking, there's people selling food, all that stuff, right?
So it's funny you mentioned that. So you see these two guys that are in the picture with me. They're of El Salvadorian descent, and I used to play. I did one season with them in this El Salvadorian team called Guanacos. And to my understanding, a Guanaco is like the equivalent of like an Azteca or a Mayan, but in a
Right.
Salvadorian
Okay.
culture.
Yeah.
Um, we used to get hundreds of people to come out to these men's league games,
Yeah.
and every goal there'd be massive cheers, every nutmeg, every tackle, like just crazy, crazy environment. And here I am, like, this honorary El Salvadorian, um, because I'm playing for this team and I'm doing well for this team, and they're playing against a team, that's Honduran based. They're playing against a Mexican based team. They're playing against. I remember a team called Tie Inside, that was English based. There had a Newcastle jersey, So
Right.
it's crazy how these cultures would come to a head and you would play against each other. But yes, like you were saying, it was an event. It was literally their like local gathering. It was an event, and then
Yeah.
afterwards, it was just like a massive party, cookouts, restaurants, whatever the case may be. But it was always something. So going back to your original question, like I didn't have those avenues
Yeah.
of going elsewhere in the American setup. So it was like I know a guy who knows a guy who knew a guy who got me like a tryouts, because they do trials in Mexico, and I got there, and from there it was really like backpacking around until you made it.
That I mean that sounds like an incredible experience, like whether you make it or not. Going back to your photo here at the Azteca, like during this period in your life, again, you're pointing at the U.S. badge. Your boy's wearing a U.S. hat. We spend so much time talking about the pull of the different cultures and these kids who have to make choices. You and I have talked about that in other forums. What were your feelings about soccer? And I mean, at that point, what the U.S. had hosted a World Cup, failed at a World Cup. Obviously Mexican soccer was still dominant on the continent, even though the U.S. had a couple of successes. What was your feelings about, being pulled in both those directions?
It's conflicting, and I I see kids deal with it today. I mean, think about this for a second. Think about how fucked up this is. You're asking a kid to out himself, identify himself to the rest of
Yeah.
the world. Like choose who are you right now. Was something that people like they could be in their 30s, 40s until this day are coming to terms with. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's a very strange feeling. Um, I'm the oldest of five. Mexican immigrants, first generation in this country, and I've always identified when high school people ask you like, "Oh, what are you?" I'm Mexican.
Right.
Same way that majority of people answer today. But now you're being asked, "What are you?" in a situation where you say Mexican. No, you're just Mexican. Now you're not American, and we're talking about a game. We're talking about soccer. So it was a
Yeah.
very difficult thing to kind of grasp back then. And I'm just lucky that social media didn't exist, because now you see the pressures, you see the avenues that these kids can be influenced by. You see how negative and toxic social media can be with these kids, and just in general, it's it's difficult. So here I am in this situation where I'm trying to make a name for myself in Mexico, just an opportunity, and I realize what this rivalry is. You know, it's one thing. It's one
Yeah.
thing to see it on TV. It's one thing to maybe read about it. And kids today, the generation today, we have a very good, healthy understanding of what this rivalry has been and how it's gone back and forth for quite some time, and it's been competitive, right? That wasn't the case before.
Yeah.
That was not the case before. I'm old enough to remember when the U.S. used to get beat like 4, 5, 6, 7-0. You know, where certain players that I grew up watching a national team were never competitive players to the Mexican national team player. That's just the reality. Um, all that has changed.
Yeah.
All that has changed because of where the programs are today, because of what had happened. But back then it wasn't. So around the time that I'm here was the pivotal shift between the two rivalries. This is 2001. 2002 was the day, or I should say the year, and most Mexicans could tell you the day they realized that this rivalry had turned and changed forever. That was the year. That was the World Cup tournament. That was the World Cup game. That was a World Cup minute. They will tell you 2-0 when the
Yeah.
U.S. knocked them out of a World Cup qualifier and kind of cemented themselves as like here in this rivalry. So I was very much in the thick of this, and this game, if memory serves me correct, was a Jared Borghetti goal. It was a
Mm.
1-0 win. Javier Aguirre had just come on into the fold. Javier Aguirre, who's with Mallorca right now, the head coach, to save them, to take them to the World Cup. They weren't doing so hot. So this was kind of a changing of the guards, but this game in particular, like a last ditch effort on the Mexican national team's part of getting to that World Cup. So it was a crazy kind of tension brewing in the stadium.
There may have this may have just I'm guessing this was just not that long, a couple of months probably after the game in Columbus when the U.S. beat Mexico at Cruz Stadium, which set up hold 2-0 and all that stuff. So yeah, that's the moment, and there you are again, rocking the U.S. stuff. I mean, um, with your background with Vegas, with the men's league, with all those things, having to find your way in soccer without having the opportunity. I mean, did you resent sort of the system as it existed, ODP with having to pay for it and college recruiting and all that? Did you resent any of that?
I don't even think I understood it.
Okay.
There was no room for resentment. I didn't understand it, and I guess this is sad, but I was a product of my circumstances, so you almost kind of grow to accept it. Like not that, never in my mind did it cross that I deserved better, the same opportunities. And
Okay.
now I think about it, and I'm like, why would I not deserve this opportunity because I couldn't afford it? You know what I mean? Like, if that is that what it's about? Because my
Right.
parents weren't aware of this, or even if they were, they would never pay for it for me to get there. Like, it just never crossed my mind. But now I think of it, and it's not resent, but it's just like profound sadness for many kids in my situation. Think about how backwards we were, and I'm sure some will point out it was a necessity, so to speak, right? But we have this draft where back then the majority players in Major League Soccer would come out of this draft. I would say probably all of them would come out of this draft, incoming domestic players.
Yeah.
And you get your first taste of first team football at 21, 22, or 23 years of age. Like, the rest of the world's like, what are you doing? That's way too late. You're way too old. If you've not made it by that age, you should be out of the game. Here we are introducing players to a professional setup at that age.
Hmm.
Um, it was kind of strange because I'm in these two worlds, right? I'm trying to make it, and I see the kids. I mean, I've been in Mexico, professional player, first team player. I was at Pachuca. Great setup now as a player in Pachuca. Well, this is one of the crazy things is Pachuca said no to me as a third division player and then paid millions for me later in a transfer fee, after I won a goal scoring title with Puebla. So I am there. And one of my teammates debuted at 15 years of age.
Yeah.
15. This is the rest of the world. So everything opens my eyes. Being there, even though I wasn't in the setup yet, like, opens my eyes to just what football is. So it's. I don't think I resented it by any means, but it definitely made me feel some type of way that it was like that.
So you didn't necessarily resent what was going on in the U.S. because you didn't understand it, and obviously, sort of just ignorance, not knowing, naive to that. But in Mexico, there's a path, and you go there, and you're trying to catch on. Do you now? I mean, obviously, that wasn't ultimately the beginning of your career, right? You didn't end up catching on in Mexico and stay there, and you ended up going back later. Do you think about, you know, if somebody had given me a chance at that point, what would your path have been? Had you think about those things? If you had a
No,
passport, if you were able to stick around.
no, I don't, because I think things worked out the way they would have. Not there. I think about them now in the sense of I got to do some cool things in my career. But there's a contingent of fans today that would never really know about it, right? And if I did what I did in my career then now, as a 21-year-old developmental player and being the team MVP of a team that in Major League Soccer won two trophies in 1 year, the Open Cup and MLS Cup, and I came onto the scene in June, and by the end of the season in November, I led the team in goals in both the Open Cup and MLS.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be Bundesliga teams knocking on my door. There'd be, like, you know what I mean? There would be all
Yeah.
the types of teams like, hey, especially now in today's climate, how the American player is viewed, like there could have been a different avenue and different choices for me. Like I had a choice later on in my life to go play in Europe, but if I had that choice when I was 20, 21
Mm-hmm.
and doing well, and listen, I think I became the team MVP that year in '05, and I went from making 12,600 a year net or gross, excuse me, to making 52. They raised me to 52. Like, hey kid, congrats. Here's 52 grand. Like, do you know what I mean? Knowing what I know now, like
Yeah.
that's just the way it was, and you had to
Yeah.
accept it. They had you by the balls. They're like, here's another 4 year we picked up all your options. Congrats. That wouldn't happen today. So I think about those things, but everything worked out the way it did. And I'm happy for that. I had a great time in my second stint in Mexico.
Right.
By no means is it a cheap property. They pay very well. So I enjoyed my time, but it definitely one of those situations like what had happened then if it happens now, but not in the sense of if I made it when I was 18 in Mexico that
Yeah.
first go around.
Well, what was the it seems like you enjoyed it, but what was the reception like to a Mexican American? I mean, nowadays it's like, oh, these Mexican American kids, they grow up in the US, they play for MLS teams, they get recruited by the Mexican national team and make a big deal out of it. You're 18, 19 years old, you're from Vegas, so you're, by Mexican standards, you're very American. What's the response to you?
So it's funny. I always tell people because when I'm in these setups, I go to a new club. So now that I'm a known player, even when you're a known player, that was just crazy. Um, I had won a goal scoring title in Puebla, and I was a bit of a known commodity now in Liga MX. People, very easy and recognizable name. It's not too many Hercules going around in the world, so you'll
Not a lot.
identify. And Jason, you're the gringo. You're El Gringo. They identify you as El Gringo.
Yeah.
I go to a certain club, and I always felt like El Gringo. I always felt like the American playing in that club or in that city, and oftentimes when you go into a setup, you already signed your contract, you're already getting paid your wages, you're part of the team, but you don't feel part of the team within that first week. Players don't pass you the ball. Some players don't talk to you, but then you
Yeah.
realize it has nothing to do with your nationality, but it has everything to do with because you're taking food off somebody's plate,
Yeah.
either the person you're trying to take their position or the friend of, and it's very cutthroat. It's a very cutthroat business. But once you prove yourself, you're still El Gringo, but you're their Gringo, and that's always the way I felt. I took great pride, man. I I,
Yeah.
I remember I remember playing I remember playing for Santos Laguna. We were champions in Santos Laguna, and I was a big part of that. I remember playing, the CONCACAF Champions League with Santos Laguna against Major League Soccer clubs, and when those clubs would come to El TSM, to Estadio Corona, when they would come to that beautiful stadium, you'd look above. I believe it was the north goal. You'd look above, and there are flags there. The Mexican flag. There was a Ecuadorian flag, a Colombian flag, a Uruguayan flag, or Panamanian flag, excuse me. And then there was the American flag. That I was the reason that American flag was on there. So I always took great pride in those things. And like I'll say it again. You were the gringo, but you were their gringo. So
Yeah.
that always, as soon as you proved yourself, was a good thing.
Were you thinking? I mean, I mean, I know how that is to be 18, 19, and just kind of like you may have dreams, but really it's you just kind of just making your way. But did you have? I mean, were you already thinking I'm going to play professionally? I'm going to go to a World Cup. Was that on your mind in 2001?
No, I mean it's funny you say that because I talked about Pachuca and I told you how we were in a hangar with like the bunk beds on each side and the showers, and it was like kids. It was like Lord of the Flies, kids trying to govern themselves. And honestly, it's like the craziest of atmospheres. But within those setups, they try to professionalize those setups. Pachuca till this day still does that. I remember having like sports psychology sessions in Pachuca, and we would go into this room, like my category, my team that I was trying out for, this third division team, and they dim the lights, and the sports psychologist is, with the little sound, the ambiance she's setting it, and she's having you envision what you want out of life, envision where you want to be, and I guarantee you, 99% of those players, people in that room are thinking World Cup, World Cup, World Cup. I'm thinking I just want to make some money. Like that's where my head was at. Like I want to get on this team. I want to make. But it's funny when that you think you mentioned that now, because the first time I really thought World Cup was in the following year, probably months. It was the 2002 World Cup in South Korea
Yeah.
and Japan, where the U.S. men's national team is playing against Mexico. And here I am, and I've been watching the U.S. so closely, and they've got Landon Donovan and DeMarcus Beasley, who are the same age as I am, same age group, 1982, the very first residency program. IMG, this Bradenton Academy that we've always heard about, they were the very first ones. DeMarcus, Landon, that generation went on to I believe it was a U17 World Cup, and they were
Mm-hmm.
fourth place, I think what, third or fourth place in the world. They had
Mm-hmm.
Kuchi Aweyu, Kyle Beckerman was part of that setup.
Yeah.
Had some very good players, and I remember thinking to myself, these two kids are my age. They're teenagers, and I'm sitting here at home watching them play, and they're in a fucking World Cup. It, like that to me just read like it's tangible. It like
Right.
opened my eyes.
Well, um, were you a cocky kid as a player? I mean, obviously you're scoring hat tricks in the men's league. Are you when you go down to Mexico? Do you think you're the shit?
No, I
No.
mean, I think I was confident for sure, when I was in the States, because like you said, at your level you're a big fish. So, but even within me being a big fish, I was never the biggest fish. So I always had, like I wasn't the best player growing up in Vegas. That player was a kid named Boomer Alvarez. Boomer played for Chivas USA for like a year or two. Um, I wasn't the most known player coming out of high school. That player was Ruben Quijón. He became like a state senator.
There you go.
In Vegas. So there was always somebody bigger.
Yeah.
And everywhere I went, there was always somebody better. So I never had that. I mean, trust me, I was a confident kid, because that'll come with playing and scoring goals and confident in your ability. But I was humbled really quick in Mexico. Um, One of the things back when I was growing up in the States that we lacked severely in our development was the actual structure. So I was very good at being a goal scorer. I was very bad at the actual principles of being a good footballer, the basics. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
And when I went to Mexico, you learn that very quickly. It's funny. I was just with my daughter at her AYSO game this past weekend. She's a U6 now. She's 5 years old. Um, and we went to this school for the game, and this school is a very nice school, and their mascot is this dragon. There's a wall with a big dragon imprint on there, and there's this little boy, and he's knocking the ball back and forth against this wall, and my daughter just stops and stares at him, like 5 feet away from him, like, what is this kid doing? And I explained to her, and my mind just completely like brought me back to when I was in Mexico. The first moment I got there, they call that a fronton, this wall. And kids before training and after training would go to this fronton and just knock the ball back and forth hundreds, if not thousands of times. Reception, right foot, left foot, instep, laces, juggling in the air, right back to you. And I would explain to her how many times I would do that when I was in Mexico, in Cruz Azul specifically, just training to try to get better as a footballer. But I had to do that because I was so far behind the rest,
Hmm.
like the proper basics, the things that make good footballers. Those things I didn't have. I was faster than everybody, more athletic. I hit the ball way harder than anybody in my age group, or some of the guys who were already first team professionals. I've always had that. I had a knack for scoring goals. My foot, right foot, left foot with my head, but there were certain principles that I was
Yeah.
lacking. So, to answer your question, like I was humbled very quickly. It was made, it was pointed out and made, and I was made aware of that there were certain things that I was lacking. So that any type of cockiness you did have would go out the window very quick, especially in a small sided drill. I'm thinking to myself like, holy shit, these guys are like, I'm faster than everybody. Why are they faster than me right now?
Right.
They're thinking faster, the
Mhm.
reception is cleaner, the pass from right foot to left foot, so I can't get there is a lot quicker. So, I
What, what
realized very quickly.
what were the calls home like? If you got calls home, what were the calls home like? I mean, what did you tell your dad about your experience?
I wanted to go home 100 times in the first month, and this was before the iPhone. This was before
Yeah.
Zoom or Skype. It was like prevalent. I'm calling collect on payphones. Like pay banks. Those phone banks, I should
Yeah.
say. And it was a lot of talking to my parents, talking to my mom, talking to anybody who would talk to me, because you didn't have those outlets. I very much felt like a foreigner. This was all foreign to me. I'd grown up with Mexican culture like instilled in me, spoke the language, ate the food,
Yeah.
but it was a culture shock actually living in Mexico. And I didn't understand it at first. And now it's like one of my most favorite things is like being immersed in that culture. I met my wife in Mexico. My kids will have, two cultures instilled in them as well. But very much in that moment, it was a culture shock.
Yeah. Let's fast forward a little bit. I mean, this Herc is in Mexico trying to get his career started. A couple years later, you're in San Diego. Get us to that point before the breakthrough with the Galaxy.
I would say months later, I'm in San Diego. And I got to this tryout with the San Diego Gauchos, which is like a D3 program. And back then, it would be like USL 2, right?
Yeah.
Now, um, I must have been making like $500 a
Were
month.
mostly college kids in this team then?
No, that was the
No.
great thing. I was the youngest kid on the team. I was 19 years old. Everybody else was second. I mean, they had a job. They had primary jobs. They weren't footballers, but they had a great passion for football. This team was created, and a majority of those guys were school teachers, lawyers, doctors, whatever, and they would train at night after like their 9 to 5 would end. So here I am, like, I was one of the few guys actually paid um, to play, but I was getting like 500
Still a
net a
ringer.
month.
Still a ringer, huh?
The youngest guy on the team, and to actually to so I could survive. I lived with one of the players on the team who was like a player coach, and they got me a job coaching kids. Twice a week I would go do clinics for kids. So excuse me, two times a week I would train kids like an actual team, and then the third day of the week I would do clinics with all these kids within the club. Funny stories. One of the kids who was like the crown jewel of the club I used to coach, his name's Paul Ariola. Um,
Yeah, I know who that is.
yeah, and he was a very good player back then. A very good, like tiny kid, and
You
just
take credit for Paul Ariola's career at this point, Herc?
what once a week for about a few months I took credit for Fariola. Yeah, but that's what I would do to play football, and it wasn't I was just trying to extend my career but have fun at the same time. And I really thought, like, especially meeting those guys and kind of being now with grown-ups, and I didn't think my life would take me into professional football anymore. I just thought I would do football as a way to find something else to do, or as a way to kind of
Did you
do
did you
something else.
did you have something else in mind? I mean, obviously for everybody in America that the idea of college is out there. Were you thinking about a different path before the Galaxy came calling?
Yeah. So when I was playing with the San Diego Gauchos, I would. I had the best time of my life. It was a D3 setup, so we'd go on the road, and on the road, I was with these guys who were grown men. Some of the first times I've ever drank in my life was with these guys. Take me to TJ, take me to Rosarito, Ensenada, show me the ropes and what. So I had this kind of like these big brothers, and all these guys were teachers, and they had summers off, and they had an accessible calendar. And I thought to myself, like, that doesn't seem too bad. So I actually in my mind thought to myself, I'll just get a teacher's credit, teaching degree,
Yeah.
and I'll do that. Glad I didn't do that. I see what some of these teachers have to deal with. But that was in my head what I was going to do, and I almost given up on football. And we played this scrimmage game against the LA Galaxy. It was so bad. I mean, we lost like 7-1. I think Matt Reese. Do you remember Matt Reese, the goalkeeper?
Sure. Yeah.
Matt Reese played on the field, scored twice on us. Like they were, he was very good with his feet. People talk about Nick Rimando.
I remember Matt Reese being
The
good. Yeah.
OG was Matt
Yeah.
Reese. Yeah, with his feet, he was very good. I mean, I run into Matt Reese a bunch here in the South Bay. Good guy, hilarious guy. Uh, little side, just showing you how good he was. Sidebar on here. I remember being in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, and Matt Reese used to play soccer tennis against everybody in the locker room, beat everybody. He used to smash people. He would do it naked. That's how like he would humiliate players. He would do it naked, but a very good player. Anyways,
Oh man.
this game ends 7-1, and Ralph Perez, who was the assistant coach for Siggy Schmidt, the late great Siggy Schmidt at that time, comes up to me and asks me like, where are you from? How old are you? What's your story? And I'm 19. And I think the youngest kid on that team with the Galaxy was like maybe Ale Moreno, who was like 22, maybe around there. Those guys that incoming or that rookie year, if you will, they're all like 21, 22, 23. Keeps tabs on me. I finished the season. I had like 17 goals, something like that, in like 17 games. Uh, they invite me to come, train with the team afterwards after our season's done. And it's like sometime in August or September, and a few guys that actually been seriously injured on the Galaxy. And there's no reserve program, there's no
Yeah.
academy. So literally, I get there, and within like the first week and a half of being there and training, they just signed me as depth. And I signed a developmental contract making shit money. I think like 860 gross a year, but 2 years, I'm sorry, but two months later, excuse me, we win the MLS Cup. So, without me even doing anything, I've got an MLS Cup ring,
I mean that must have been. I mean, regardless of the money. I mean, I guess it also kind of, we think about MLS now, very different league. Obviously, the at that point the Galaxy haven't even opened up what was the Home Depot Center to start, right? You're
Right.
still playing Rose Bowl games at that point.
Rose
Yeah.
Bowl games, and we're training in the Ball Diamond. They had a baseball field at the Rose Bowl next door, and that's where we would train.
That's incredible, and the crowds are tiny compared to the size of the Rose Bowl, but still,
Yes.
how much of that how much of that felt like making it for you, or were you kind of still in that,
Are you
you
kidding
know,
me? I walked around like I'm living in LA, I'm like, holy shit. Actually, I'm living in Santa Monica at the time, and the reason I was living in Santa Monica was because my grandparents, who were alive back then, they rented a 1 bedroom on the outskirts of Santa Monica, rent control.
okay,
Like there's no way they could have afforded it today. But rent control back then made it so I could have a place to crash. If the landlord had found out that I had been living there, they could have taken the place away from him. So I literally lived
wow,
out of my car. My closet was in my car, and I would sleep on the living room floor. And I did this gratefully, and gladly, um, for that year while I was there, as long as I could that year and the following year. And I would do like an hour to training. I mean, I would take the 2 to the 5 to the 134 to get to Pasadena. It'd be like an hour and something in traffic. The 10, excuse me, to the 5 to the 2 to the
oh yeah. If
134.
you didn't get
Crazy.
that exactly right, I was totally going to call you on all of
Yeah.
the yeah.
But the thing is, I would take all these freeways and do an hour, in, if not more, in traffic every single day, and I thought I was like, holy shit, I had made it, And I'm sitting here making $860,000. I'm sorry, 806, $860,000. Did I say that right? Yes.
I don't know what you're saying. It doesn't matter. It's not a lot of money. Just be
I'm making
clear
under
about it.
$900 gross a month is what I'm trying to say. But I'm thinking in my head, I made it. I'm with the galaxy. Like, holy shit, this is awesome. And I'm living in LA and everything's so like new. And then there's like, you know, everything you would think LA is supposed to be. And here I am. And I'm thinking to myself, I made it. And it's a matter of time until like things change for me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so that's just the beginning, though. Obviously, in terms of your professional career, and I don't know if we're going to spend another hour breaking it all down. I kind of want to get to the World Cup. I want to talk about the move to Mexico. You already kind of hit on it, right? Going back to Mexico, and it just being in a very different place. What were your emotions around that move, right? Because when it comes up, the possibility of going back and playing in Mexico, imagine that you went back to being 19 and in that picture in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost, because I had nothing. It was a much different moment. So I had spent some time now in Major League Soccer. I'd been a bit more established. I played with the national team in the Copa America. I'd won a couple titles with the LA Galaxy. Um, I was coming off my very first like injury. I tore my ACL in Colorado, and I'd been traded shortly after the Kansas City, and that preseason, I had a meniscal tear, and I remember another knee surgery, and I'm thinking to myself, like, oh man, and I didn't feel like I was right leading into that season, and then things went very south for us, and it kind of got pushed out of the picture where I wasn't playing much, if at all, under Peter Vermes, and we went from having a situation where I was negotiating a new 4-year deal to them kind of pulling it, and hey, here's the next 4-year deal, take it or leave it, 70 grand a year flat, having negotiated kind of, you know double if not more, and it would increment every single year. They kind of pull it that way, and I'm thinking to myself, like, they're just basically telling me to go die,
Yeah.
so I don't want to do this deal. I'm not going to do it, and I went back to Vegas and started square one, kind of like I was, after I came back from that picture. And um, it was actually Ralph Perez again who reached out and told me, like, oh, I'm sorry, this was not Ralph Perez. That was the first go around. It was actually after that time that it was the coach, the assistant coach for the team I used to play for in that Puebla team, reached out and had asked me what my situation was, and he'd asked me if I had a Mexican passport now, and I said yes. I got my Mexican passport now, and asked me if I'd be up for trying Mexico again, and this time it's kind of me just saying, like, well, I don't really have another option, and Puebla came about. There was an
Well,
opportunity at Puebla.
was the passport thing connected to football? I mean, were you thinking about your future with that?
Always, always.
So
So yeah,
after your trip as a teenager, you went and got your passport so you could have the chance of going back.
I believe I got my passport in Denver, my Mexican passport. I was
Okay.
playing with, yeah, there was some interest from Tigres at that time,
Okay.
and the Rapids kind of, Fernando Clavijo
Yeah.
kind of pushed me to get in that Mexican passport. It's funny because if you see, like, we played an exhibition game, one of those, they invite Mexican teams on and whatnot, and they make a facade, a fake little trophy, and they'll give it to the winner and whatnot. Um, that's the only game that I've was captain for the Colorado Rapids, where they made me the captain against Tigres. Like, hey, if you want him, he's yours. Trying to promote me and sell me. So I had my Mexican passport. It happens. I get to Puebla. Not a lot of money. 6-month contract. I got there a month late, so it's a 5-month contract. And things just changed. It's not even like they clicked. They just changed. It was a situation where I'm not known. I felt like I was back the first go around in Mexico. I felt like these things that I needed to work on are still evident that I need to work on, especially in the tactical setup.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like they're speaking a foreign language, and I spoke Spanish. Like,
Yeah.
if you're an American and you get dumped into the UK and there's rhyme cockney, you have no idea what that is. There's albur in Mexico and
Mm.
Mexican culture, and it just feels like everything's going so fast in the game and whatnot. And
Yeah.
but all I know is when I come on the field, I'm dangerous. I'm the same player I've always been, for better or worse. I'm dangerous. I'm getting opportunities, and I've just started scoring. And what was crazy was I started scoring in Major League Soccer, and I always found it like to be a thrill. When I first started scoring goals in Major League Soccer, I thought it was like crazy that I'm around LA and people would recognize me. They'd have to be diehard fans, but they would recognize me, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's cool. Oh my God, they recognize me. I can't go out now in Puebla. Now I'm thinking to myself, like, oh fuck, they really recognize me. Like this is this could be a problem.
Yeah.
And with that attention comes a different type of attention, like agents, reporters, uh, people trying to offer you things as far as sponsors. So now I'm thinking to myself, like, this is a whole different world, and it opens up my eyes. And that's really when Puebla's really when I started seeing the sport as more than just something I wanted to try to do.
Did you do you think about I mean, it's like one of those things where you have some success, things go well for you, and you don't want to look too closely at it because you don't want to ruin the magic of it or whatever. I mean, obviously, you're a pretty good player, right? You've had a professional career to that point. You scored a bunch of goals in Major League Soccer. No reason not to be confident. But do you ever think about it at the time where you like, okay, why is this happening now? Or is it just like, all right, ride the wave?
A little of both. I kind of I'm very thankful it happened at that age of 27 years old when I really broke out, that way. Just because there are things that kind of prepared me to handle the attention, prepared
Yeah.
me to handle certain things that came my way on and off the field that I don't think I would have been ready for at such a young age.
Yeah.
And I was hardened, if you will.
You're a wily vet at that point.
Well,
Yeah.
no, not a wily vet in the sense, but the World Cup's the ultimate mecca, right? So when I go into that 30-man camp, I have this mentality about me. I have this huge chip on my shoulder from everything I've experienced. So
Hmm.
I'm not taking anything for granted. Like, you know, it, it's like I'm gonna eat your lunch, you're not gonna eat mine. I remember going to the 30-man camp, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I remember 30-man camp. I felt like I had been in zero camps, 0 minutes. These players don't know me.
Yeah.
I don't feel I'm not part of this team. I'm taking somebody's spot. So if it was a finishing drill, I had to be the best. In my mind, I had to come top three always. If it was a fitness drill, I had to do the same. I always had to do something where they were like, "Oh shit, that kid stood out again." And it was driven home when we're in Hartford, Connecticut, and we're going to play against the Czech Republic. It's 1 through 30 is the numbering system in the national team for the 30-man camp. I walk in and I'm looking at the names and the numbers and I'm looking for mine, and I get to my locker and it's number 30. And it's like, there you go, fucking last man. That's you right now.
Yeah. Wow.
So I needed it everything that I experienced kind of mentally I was in that position, and this is what you have to do. This is who you are. And I continued that mentality because if you look at Champions League, like every time I played against a Major League Soccer team in CONCACAF Champions League, I
Hmm.
wanted to make a point like I was hard done. I wanted to make a point like I had a chip on my shoulder, something to prove. And to this day, if you look at the numbers, if there's a Mexican player who has more goals against an MLS team in their history, it's me.
Yeah.
And I'm Mexican American.
Do you think that I don't know, getting the way things happen in Kansas City, getting to Puebla, not getting a big contract, getting a 5-month contract, not exactly knowing what your future was going to be, and obviously at that point having some experience, and then obviously going into the national team camp and the World Cup. Do you think that that sort of drive pushed you to reach? Do you think you reached your ceiling? You hit the top level of what you were capable of as a player?
No, because I think you need to be at a higher level to reach that top level.
Oh,
And
so
I
if you
see
were
this
in a tougher environment than even Mexico, you might have been a better player than you were.
absolutely.
Okay.
And I think that's a lot of the discourse we see online and social media today with fans feeling like it's a necessity for these American players to play at the highest of levels and even sooner, the better.
Hmm.
It's a reality. Iron sharpens iron. Like if I'm in a better setup, I've got better coaching, I've got better resources.
Fair.
My capacity for intake can be higher, and my output could be greater. That's a reality. But I'm very pleased with the way I took advantage of certain opportunities and circumstances that came along the way. And especially in my time, I mean, you've been around for a long time, Jason. You know how much the landscape has changed like today.
Yeah,
I mean, some of these kids have a good season, one good season, and they're gone.
they're
You
gone.
know,
Yeah.
I mean, even in Mexico, you're seeing kids forced into the national team picture that would have never happened before.
Mm.
There was a much more of a process, and you had to earn those stripes. And now, for better or worse, they're getting these opportunities at a much greater pace.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, I'm always curious about. I mean, and look, this is about life. It doesn't matter you're a professional athlete, you're not. Things change in the world, and then you go, well, if I had come up now instead of 15 years ago, what opportunities would be available to me, or what I and I think that obviously is a weird path to go down because you don't know how it would have played out, right? If you
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
go to Mexico at 19 because you don't see any other options, maybe you don't end up following the path that you do.
Man, I've seen way too many Back to the Future movies. I don't want to. I don't want to move something
That's
because then you know.
That's something. Yeah, that's something. There's something to be that. I want to. This is obviously about your photo and about your story, and I'm glad we went back to this point. There's a whole pre Mexico trip, Herculez Gomez, that we've only kind of scratched the surface on. But I think in the last couple of minutes here, I want to ask you about how you envisioned your post playing career going. I mean, obviously you're a media personality now. You seem to work more than anybody else I know. You're working in multiple languages. You've helped create something with Football Americas that American soccer fans of all backgrounds, can find something in. What was your thought? I mean, when the moment came, okay, got to hang them up. Now what do I do?
My thought actually going into my latter years of as a professional was so I had the situation with Cholos, my club that had my rights in Mexico. I had a 4-year contract with them, so I still had a year left in my contract, and they wanted to send me to a second division team, and they were like, "Hey, thing is, you'll make half the money that we owe you there, but you'll get to play." And I'm like, "That's not what I want to do." And sometimes in Mexico, they force you into situations where you say yes, so you don't stop playing. I was like, "Listen, I understand where I'm at in 34 years of age right now, 33, I think I was at the time 34. I'm not going to play in another World Cup, like pay me my money. They like literally were trying to exhaust all options and they found Barcelona in Ecuador that, like, hey, this team wants you. And I'm like, I'm not going to Ecuador. And then came in the New York Cosmos, who were
I didn't
willing
know
to
that.
pay me the exact dollar amount that they owed me, which was a pretty penny to go play in New York.
Yeah.
And when I was at Tigres, they had tried to reach out to see if I was interested because they were willing to spend a transfer fee and make me a handsome offer to go to the NASL with the New York Cosmos. At this time, Raul was
Giovanni
playing for 'em.
Savarese was the head coach of that team.
I had spoken to Giovanni during the Cholos preseason where I'm training by myself and I'm living out of a hotel with my wife and I'm training literally, I shouldn't say by myself. I was training with the pilot program that they had, which is like a second division team, a U23 team, like on some dirt fields. And Giovanni calls me and he's like, "Hey, you would be valued here. We want you here. We're going to respect your contract, this and that. I want to build something. I want you to be part of it." And I remember telling Giovanni respectfully how much I appreciated the interest and how much I appreciated, what they were asking and what they were willing to do. But I didn't want to go out like that. And I envisioned my career in a certain way. I had always the idea that I was going to work in front office.
Hmm.
Like I really thought that I wanted to be a sporting director. I really thought that roster construction, that negotiations, international player deals, whatever was something that I wanted to do. And I thought it would be out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I thanked them for the opportunity. And I took an 80% pay cut to go play for Toronto
Well,
with the idea of spend a few years more in Major League Soccer and transition to something like that. And then it really wasn't until Toronto, the first year we made the playoffs, we played against Montreal in the first round or playoff game, I should say,
yeah.
like a play in game in Montreal and lost 3-0. So that weekend, like the rest of the team started their playoffs. And MLS had, they would do the MLS live and they would have their own studio programming for whatnot. They invited me out, and it was in New York, and I went out and I had a fun time with those guys. And because of that, Fox actually called me during my vacation, and then just one thing led to another, and it ended up where I worked Copa America, and they liked what they saw. And when the U.S. men's national team would play and the guys would get a call up, I would get a call up for Fox, and we'd be on the same plane traveling to the same place, except they would play and I would, go do my TV thing. And that's how it started.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, I started seeing kind of the front office work, and I was like, maybe that's not for me. And it just transitioned into this. And once I'm here, I want to be here. I've told ESPN, I've told them I don't want to be one of these guys who works in TV and it's a stop for me. It's a train station.
Yeah.
I don't want to use it to leverage something else. I want to be here for 30 plus years. This is what I want to do. I want to entertain. I've been accustomed to consuming the game in a different manner. And I feel like sometimes we don't have that in our landscape, especially in the media.
Sure.
And, it doesn't mean there's just a right way or a wrong way. It's just a different way. And I think I offer something different. And I'm, so far, I'm enjoying myself. You know how this is, Jason. I don't got to tell you, the day that I stop enjoying this,
Yeah.
I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm gone.
Yeah. It's a different kind of attention now. And I'm curious how you kind of process that. Like, obviously, you start score, you get recognized every now and then by a diehard Galaxy fan in the early mid-aughts, whatever that was. You score some goals for Puebla and you're a superstar in Mexico, and now you're sort of one of the faces, one of the voices of American soccer. It's a different kind of attention.
It is, because the American is different. It's and I say that because it's more sophisticated than ever before in how much they pay close attention to the game. I mean, they're U.S. men's national team fans, but they also consume Liga MX, and they also consume the Premier League and La Liga, and they have their MLS team or whatever the case may be. There's no fooling these people. Like they're very quick to call you out if they don't agree.
Yeah.
And the dialogue, if it's respectful, is welcome. Like I've got no issue with that. But definitely the attention is different because I've got a platform that allows me to be on two different languages, right? Two different countries. So it's different. And the attention isn't what's, I guess, gets to me. It's when it becomes, how can I say it? Sometimes it's not so pleasant, I've had cases. I have cases
sure.
on social media. I have cases in person, whether it's in the States or in Mexico, where things are like, whoa, what's going on here? And it's because of, who you are or what you represent or what you said. So that's always new to me.
Sometimes it's not even what you said. It's just who you are. It's just that you have that gig, right?
You're right. It's not even what I said, because I have no allegiance to the Montreal Impact, but if they're playing in Conca Champions versus a Liga MX team, like I'm gonna get lots and lots of ats and mentions on social media, and vice versa. There's a lot of people who ask why I defend Mexican soccer so much, and they're very vocal about that, and there's a traitor talk here and there, but it comes with the territory.
Sure.
That stuff's fine. It's when it's, I mean, I remember a Leagues Cup game, the Leagues Cup showcase. Do you remember when it was here in SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, and it was Club America, it was LAFC, it was a Galaxy and Chivas?
I remember, yeah.
I went to the Super Bowl, Jason, that year. It didn't come close to the atmosphere. It was insane. It was SoFi Stadium was packed to the gills, and it was these passionate fan bases, MLS and Liga MX. It was the most crazy event I've ever been to, and I kid you not. I couldn't go to the bathroom because there was rows and crowds of people who would come up and talk to you, grab you, ask you for pictures, sign this, sign that. Majority Latino. But one of the most comfortable things that I had happen to me was a drunk Galaxy fan come up to me and angrily say that I disrespect the team, that I don't love him anymore, because I said that LAFC was overtaking him, and well, what do you know? Here we are, and everything. But like in my face, drunk and like belligerent and almost like half in tears. But in my face, like, is this guy gonna do something? What's going on here? It can get a little weird.
All right, so I'll wrap it up here with a question about 19-year-old Herculez Gomez in that picture of the Estadio Azteca with your boys, and if you had a time machine and you went back to 2001 and you sat down next to that Herc and you said, "Hey, this is what's going to happen. This is your career." Is that version of Herculez Gomez like, yo, that's great. I'm in for that. Or what does he think of the career that you've had in every way?
Abso-fucking-lutely. I think that version of Herc would say, "Sign me up," just because of the opportunities I had or didn't have at my disposal. Like I think I've overachieved on the field, off the field. I firmly believe one of my better traits is self awareness. Like I had no business going as far as I did. I have no business being in TV for as long as I have, to be quite honest, or the opportunities that have been afforded to me. But it's been a wild ride, and I would, in a heartbeat, take that. What I would do is want to record all that, because not so much to let's sell it, let's become a TV show or documentary, but because I think nowadays people think things are given. And I don't know, I don't have to tell you this, but there is so much that goes behind the scenes, the grind,
Yeah.
the bad moments, the failures that we have in life that kind of set you up for when you actually have that opportunity and it goes well. Like there's so much of that I think it's lost today, you know, and especially as we're talking about, I mean, we could apply this to the game, but just in life, like I, there's nothing given.
Yeah.
And I think the moment people realize that, and they can see things like that, the better. And even today, these kids, the Ricardo Pepis, the Sendejas, like that's great, but they're not here without the Jose Torres, you know, the Edgar Castillos,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
The
the
Herculez
Mies.
Gomez's.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
here
for
without
sure.
the Marcelo Balboas,
Yeah.
you know, the Wilmer or the Hugo Perez of the world, the
Fernando
Fernando
Claudio.
Clavijos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's I think a lot of that it could be valuable for others.
You speak about recording, and I didn't ask you about the camcorder in your hand. I thought you were like, what were you doing over here? You were trying to record the game from your nosebleed seats? Is that what? Or your boys? You're getting your boys on camera.
Dude, I didn't even realize that, but I guess I was doing this before we even started. Like it's funny because the 2002 MLS Cup in Gillette Stadium, when that happened, the first go around, it was a 1-0 win by the Galaxy. There's a picture, and we're all in the locker room celebrating.
Yeah.
You know, the championship shirts and the alcohol and whatnot. And I have a picture where I'm doing a selfie before the selfie is even popular.
You invented the selfie.
That's right. I have proof of that.
That's amazing. Herculez Gomez, thank you very much, man. Incredible conversation. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Jay.